Congressman Roemer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Dr. Rice. And I just want to say to you that you've made it through 2.5 hours so far with only Governor Thompson to go. And if you'd like a break of 5 minutes, I'd be happy to yield you some of Governor Thompson's time. Dr. Rice, you have said in your statement, which I find very interesting, the terrorists were at war with us, but we were not at war with them. Across several administrations of both parties, the response was insufficient. And tragically, for all the language of war spoken before September 11th, this country simply was not on a war footing. You're the National Security Advisor to the President of the United States. The buck may stop with the President. The buck certainly goes directly through you as the principal advisor to the President on these issues. And it really seems to me that there were failures and mistakes, structural problems, all kinds of issues here leading up to September 11th that could have and should have been done better. Doesn't that beg that there should have been more accountability, that there should have been a resignation or two, that there should have been you or the President saying to the rest of the administration somehow, somewhere, that this was not done well enough?
Mr. Roemer, by definition, we didn't have enough information, we didn't have enough protection because the attack happened, by definition. And I think we've all asked ourselves what more could have been done. I will tell you, if we had known that an attack was coming against the United States, an attack was coming against New York and Washington, we would have moved heaven and earth to stop it. But you heard the character of the threat reporting we were getting. Something very, very big is going to happen. How do you act on something very, very big is going to happen beyond trying to put people on alert? Most of the threat reporting was abroad. I took an oath, as I've said, to protect,
I've heard you say
and
this.
I take it very seriously. I know that those who attacked us that day, and attacked us, by the way, because of who we are, no other reason, but for who we are, that they are the responsible parties for the war that they launched against us,
But Dr.
the attack
Rice,
that they made, and that,
you have
that
said
our
several times
responsibility
you have
is
said
to
several times that your responsibility being in office for 230 days was to defend and protect the United States. You had an opportunity, I think, with Mr. Clark, who had served a number of presidents going back to the Reagan administration, who you decided to keep on in office, who was a pile driver, a bulldozer, so to speak. But this person who you, in the Woodward interview, he's the very first name out of your mouth when you suspect that terrorists have attacked us on September the 11th. You say, I think, immediately it was a terrorist attack, get Dick Clark, the terrorist guy. Even before you mention Tenet and Rumsfeld's names, get Dick Clark. Why don't you get Dick Clark to brief the President before 9/11? Here is one of the consummate experts that never has the opportunity to brief the President of the United States on one of the most lethal, dynamic, and agile threats to the United States of America. Why don't you use this asset? Why doesn't the President ask to meet with Dick Clark?
Well, the President was meeting with his Director of Central Intelligence. And Dick Clark is a very, very fine counterterrorism expert, and that's why I kept him on. And what I wanted Dick Clark to do was to manage the crises for us and help us develop a new strategy. And I can guarantee you, when we had that new strategy in place, the President, who was asking for it and wondering what was happening to it, was going to be in a position to engage it fully. The fact is that what Dick Clark recommended to us as he has said, would not have prevented 9/11. I actually would say that not only would it have not prevented 9/11, but if we had done everything on that list, we would have actually been off in the wrong direction about the importance that we needed to attach to a new policy for Afghanistan and a new policy for Pakistan, because even though Dick is a very fine counterterrorism expert, he was not a specialist on Afghanistan. That's why I brought somebody in who really understood Afghanistan. He was not a specialist on Pakistan. That's why I brought somebody in to deal with Pakistan. He had some very good ideas. We acted on them. Dick Clark, let me just step back for a second and say we had a very good relationship.
Very concise
but
here,
all
so
that
I
he
can get
needed,
to some
all
more
that he
issues.
needed to do was to say, I need time to brief the president on something.
I
But
think he did say that. Dr. Rice, in a private interview to us, he said he asked to brief the President of the United States.
I have to say, Mr. Roemer, to my recollection,
You say
Dick
he
Clark
didn't.
never asked me to brief the president on counterterrorism. He did brief the president later on cybersecurity in July, but he, to my recollection, never asked. And my senior directors have an open door to come and say, I think the president needs to do this, I think the president needs to do that, he needs to make this phone call, he needs to hear this briefing. It's not hard to get done, but
Let me ask you a
think
question.
that
You just said that the intelligence coming in indicated a big, big, big threat. Something was going to happen very soon and be potentially catastrophic. I don't understand, given the big threat, why the big principals don't get together. The principals meet 33 times in 7 months on Iraq, on the Middle East, on missile defense, China, on Russia. Not once do the principals ever sit down, you, in your job description as a National Security Advisor, the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, the President of the United States, and meet solely on terrorism to discuss in the spring and the summer, when these threats are coming in, when you've known since the transition that al-Qaeda cells are in the United States, when, as the PDB said on August 6, bin Laden determined to attack the United States. Why don't the principals at that point say, let's all talk about this. Let's get the biggest people together in our government and discuss what this threat is and try to get our bureaucracies responding to it.
once again, on the August 6th memorandum to the president, this was not threat reporting about what was about to happen. This was an analytic piece that stood back and answered questions from the president. But as to the principals meetings,
It has 6 or 7 things in it, Dr. Rice, including the Rassam case when he attacked the United States in the millennium.
yes, these are his.
Has the FBI saying that they think that there are conditions.
No, it does not have the FBI saying that they think that there are conditions. It has the
Dr.
FBI saying
Rice.
that they've observed some suspicious activity. That was checked out with the FBI.
That is equal to what might be
No. With
conditions for an attack.
Mr. Roemer,
Would you
Threat
say,
reporting-
Dr. Rice,
threat
that we should
reporting.
make that PDB a public
Mr.
document so
Roemer,
we can have this
Mr. Roemer,
conversation?
threat reporting is, we believe that something is going to happen here at this time, under these circumstances. This was not threat reporting.
Well,
Now,
actionable
why- during-
intelligence, Dr. Rice, is when you have the place, time, and date. The threat reporting saying the United States is going to be attacked should trigger the principals getting together to say we're going to do something
Mr.
about
Roemer,
this,
let's
I
be
would
very
think.
clear. The PDB does not say the United States is going to be attacked. It says bin Laden would like to attack the United States. I don't think you frankly had to have that report to know that bin Laden would like to attack the United States.
So why
The
aren't
threat
you
re-
doing
the
something
threat
about that
reporting-
earlier than August 6th?
The threat
then?
reporting to which we could respond was in June and July about threats abroad. What we tried to do just because people said you cannot rule out an attack on the United States, was to have the domestic agencies and the FBI together to just pulse them and let them be on alert. But there was
I
nothing
agree
that
with
suggested
that.
there was going to be a threat to
I
the
agree
United
with
States.
that. So, Dr. Rice, let's say then, the FBI is the key here. You say that the FBI was tasked with trying to find out what the domestic threat was. We have done thousands of interviews here at the 9/11 Commission. We've gone through literally millions of pieces of paper. To date, we have found nobody at the FBI who knows anything about a tasking of field offices. We have talked to the director at the time of the FBI during this threat period, Mr. Picard. He says he did not tell the field offices to do this. And we have talked to the special agents in charge. They don't have any recollection of receiving a notice of threat. Nothing went down the chain to the FBI field offices on spiking of information, a knowledge of al-Qaeda in the country, and still the FBI doesn't do anything. Isn't that some of the responsibility of the National Security Advisor?
The responsibility for the FBI to do what it was asked was the FBI's responsibility. Now,
you don't think there's any responsibility back to
I believe that the responsibility, again, the crisis management here was done by the CSG. They tasked these things. If there was any reason to believe that I needed to do something or that Andy Cart needed to do something, I would have been expected to be asked to do it. We were not asked to do it. In fact, as I've mentioned to you...
Don't you ask somebody to do it? You're not asking somebody to do it. Why wouldn't you initiate that?
Mr. Roemer, I was responding to the threat spike and to where the information was. The information was about what might happen in the Persian Gulf, what might happen in Israel, what might happen in North Africa. We responded to that, and we responded vigorously. Now, the structure of the FBI, you will get into next week.
You've been helpful to us on that, on your recommendation.
This is the last question, Congressman.
Last question, Dr. Rice. Talking about responses, Mr. Clark writes you a memo on September the 4th where he lays out his frustration that the military is not doing enough, that the CIA is not pushing this hard enough in their agency. And he says we should not wait till the day that hundreds of Americans lay dead in the streets due to a terrorist attack, and we think there could have been something more we could do. 7 days prior to September the 11th, he writes this to you. What's your reaction to that at the time, and what's your response to that at the time?
Just one final point I didn't quite complete. I of course, did understand that the Attorney General needed to know what was going on, and I asked that he take the briefing and then asked that he be briefed because, again, there was nothing demonstrating or showing that something was coming in the United States. If there had been something, we would have acted on it.
I think we should make this document public, Dr. Rice. Would you support making the August 6th PDB public?
The August 6th PDB has been available to you. You're describing it. You're describing it. And the August 6th PDB was a response to questions asked by the President, not a warning document.
Why wouldn't it be made public then?
Now, as to, I think you know the sensitivity of presidential decision memoranda, and I think you know the great lengths to which we have gone to make it possible for this commission to view documents that are not generally, I don't know if they've ever been made available in quite this way. Now, as to what Dick Clark said on September 4th, that was not a premonition nor a warning. What that memorandum was I was getting ready to go into the September 4th principals meeting to review the new NSPD and to approve the new NSPD. What it was a warning to me that the bureaucracies would try to undermine it. Dick goes into great and emotional detail about the long history of how DOD has never been responsive, how the CIA has never been responsive, about how the Predator has gotten hung up because the CIA doesn't really want to fly it. And he says, if you don't fight through this bureaucracy, he says at one point, they're going to all sign on to this NSPD because they won't want to be they won't want to say that they don't want to eliminate the threat of al-Qaeda. He says, but you really have, in effect, you have to go in there and push them because we'll all wonder about the day when thousands of Americans and so forth and so on. So that's what this document is. It's not a warning document. It's not a threat. All of us had this fear. I think that the chairman mentioned that I'd said this in an interview that we would hope not to get to that day. But it would not be appropriate or correct to characterize what Dick wrote to me on September 4th as a warning of an impending attack. What he was doing was, I think, trying to buck me up so that when I went into this principals meeting, I was sufficiently on guard against the kind of bureaucratic inertia that he had fought all of his life.
What is a warning if August 6th isn't and September 4th isn't
Well,
to you?
August 6th is most certainly an historical document that says, here's how you might think about al-Qaeda. A warning is when you have something that suggests that an attack is impending. And we did not have, on the United States, threat information that was in any way specific enough to suggest that something was coming in the United States. The September 4th memo, as I've said to you, was a warning to me not to get dragged down by the bureaucracy, not a warning about September 11th.
Thank you, Dr. Rice. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman.